Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we complete a 3-day program on cultural sensitivity. I want to begin, as I have been over the last several weeks, with updates on the genocide in Gaza. Today is the day of prayer for Muslims around the world. Each Friday in Palestine, they've been accustomed to go to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in East Jerusalem. And that is the third most holy site in Islam after Mecca and Medina, where it is said that Muhammad took his journey to the seventh heaven. I've been there a number of times, and you can see the place where he stood and lifted off into the seventh heaven. And that has been a sacred site for the Islamic world ever since. And normally, particularly during Ramadan, tens of thousands of faithful flock to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And this year, it's being radically limited by the Israelis. They've imposed new rules that only men over 65 years of age can go, and women over 55 can go into the mosque area. And you have to not only have your residence permit, but you have to be able to show a special permit that enables you to go to this place on this day, which the Israelis are very reluctant to pass out. So as a result, there are very few of the Muslim faithful at the Al-Aqsa Mosque today, and the consternation and the alienation that's causing among the religious faithful, as you can imagine, is very, very intense. Elsewhere, the Israeli army attacked a convoy again as it was offloading food. Latest count were that 21 people were killed. They attacked with fighter helicopters, tanks, and drones, and hundreds of people were wounded. And there was a statement by the rapporteur of the UN Food Security Program that said, not in all of modern history have so many people so completely and so quickly been subjected to starvation as what's happened in the last 5.5 months to the Palestinians in Gaza. He said something I hadn't ever thought about before. He said that the UN defines famine in the following way: that 20% of the entire population has to be food deprived, 35% of the children have to be food deprived, and 2 out of 10,000 have to be dying of starvation or hunger-related diseases every day. That 3 criteria have been surpassed by the Palestinians long ago. It's about 80% of the population, and nearly 90% of the kids are in hunger deprivation, and people are dying, mostly children, every single day in increasing numbers. He pointed out that what the Israelis have been doing, they've been using white phosphorus, which is like napalm. It kills everything, it burns everything living. They've been spreading it over orchards. They've been spreading it over the fields. They've been spreading it over the agricultural lands. there in Gaza. They've cut off the three major wells that provide about 85% of the water. They've poisoned many of the smaller wells. They've destroyed 80% of all the fishing boats available to the Palestinians in Gaza. So they are quite literally, as a matter of policy, inducing mass starvation and a state in which the Palestinians will not be able to recover. That's very important for all of us to take in. This is genocidal intent that intends to sustain itself over time until there are no more Palestinians in Gaza. The Israelis intend to kill off 2.3 million Palestinians. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And he referred to the United States and said that the only way that he could characterize what the United States is doing is vile absurdity. That on the one hand, we're giving the Israelis all the weapons they need and the technology they need to do all this. We're blocking any ceasefire or meaningful negotiations. And now we've come up with this cockamamie scheme of building a floating pier that will take weeks to construct, may or may not work, because the Israelis are going to impose the same restrictions on the floating pier that they have imposed everywhere else. It's vile absurdity. It's an extraordinarily dramatic use of language by a UN bureaucrat, but that is probably an understatement for the reality that we face. And it's with this background that I have very exciting news. I've been working on it for months to try to find a way to get aid into Gaza. And I think as of this morning, I found a way. There's someone that I've known for some time who has been working on Palestinian-Israeli reconciliation for many, many years. And when I talked with him, he was in tears that everything he was working on and his organization has gone into dust. And I asked him, I said, how do you account for the collapse of the Israeli peace movement? And he said, broke his heart. And that he came to realize that the Israelis were interested in peace. They were not interested in justice. They wanted the hostilities to stop. But we're not going to give up on their notion that they are chosen and the Palestinians are not. And therefore, virtually the entire Israeli peace movement, which before October 7th was the largest in the world, the Israelis had the largest peace movement in the world, has completely evaporated into a frenzy of genocide. It's extraordinary. Sociologists are going to study the collapse of morality in Israel as a matter of deep historical interest, because it's taking human depravity into a depth. But in the glare of 24/7 news coverage that may be unprecedented, maybe unprecedented. You know, what the Nazis did was largely hidden because there was no TV. There was no way to tell what anybody was doing back then, except for vague reports that would come in weeks later. But this genocide is happening on prime time. TikTok, WhatsApp, television is broadcasting this genocide live on TV. So we're getting instantaneous information about not only what the Israelis are doing and feeling, but what the Palestinians are doing and feeling. And it's an amazing thing. But we're going to put together a GoFundMe. I'll be working on it over the weekend. And hopefully by Monday morning, we will be announcing how all of us can get aid into Gaza. Very, very, very exciting. And my whole heart just burst with joy when I found out that there was something I could do other than just bear witness. And I wanted to share it with all of you because if you try hard enough and you do not accept defeat, almost everything to which you set your heart's intent is possible. And this man has clear intent to stand with Palestine and to do everything I can to support those people. Absolutely. So by Monday morning, we're going to have a GoFundMe up and operating, and I'll share all the information with you. So thank you, everyone. In the depths of despair, the light shines. Within that context, I want to welcome back Spring Cheng, who has convened this 3-day program on cultural sensitivity and who will be concluding the program today. Spring, thank you so much, and welcome to Humanity Rising.
Thank you, Jim. Just want to take a deep breath with all of you to let Jim brought us today two news of polarity. One is very heavy reality, tragic reality, and on the other side is this great hope and inspiration for action. Thank you, Jim. Today I'm here with my partner, Joe Shirley. So this is the day 3 of Cultural Sensitivity Summit, and just a brief introduction of myself. I'm the co-founder, actually Joe and I are the co-founder of Resonance Path Institute. We are an institute committed to the transformation of consciousness towards wholeness. So since this is the day 3, you probably know me. Hopefully you already know a little bit of me, so I won't take too much of time. But I would like to introduce my partner, Joe. So I met Joe 15 years ago when at the time I'm stepping out of the, I would say the kind of the norm or the dominant cultural paradigm and embark on this journey to explore, to and was really committed to find the wholeness of the cultural heritage that I was endowed with, namely the ancient Chinese and the Taoist tradition. And I want to explore how to give it a voice, to give it a fullest expression that I could, my heart desire in this dominant cultural paradigm, which is not very friendly to it. And it was at that time I was being guided, really. I dreamed this man first in my dream. And I was being guided to meet my partner. First, we were started as a professional collaboration, but soon that collaboration has evolved into all dimensions, and we become life partners. And we have been working, eating, sleeping, drinking every day for the last 11 years in the same household. So Joe is a pioneer in the exploration of the science of first-person experience, consciousness experience. He is a scientist of our inner awareness, and he conducted his research and work in a way that I greatly admire and also benefit from. So, Joe, would you like to say something to the introduce
Really,
yourself?
it's pretty awesome to be here with you and to kind of get to participate in and support your sharing your story for the sort of setting the frame for this this cultural class that you're going to be offering. And part of what I'm going to be bringing to our conversation is just my experience with you being in an intercultural relationship. And one of the great benefits of that I want to just sort of put out there at the beginning is the inability, the impossibility of getting caught in the illusion that you and I are the same. It's like in relationships in my past, there was sometimes that sort of assumption that, of course, you think the way I do, you feel the way I do, etc. And that's actually never the case. And so having that, that illusion be never be able to take root is very helpful in bringing a certain presence and honesty into a relationship. And I think that is, it's kind of a model for what's possible in a broader space. So yeah, look forward to jumping in here with you.
Thank you, Joe. I think there we already kind of hit upon a very important aspect of cultural sensitivity, which is, in a way, it's a paradox. Like, in order to honor and embody the unity that we are, we actually need to keep very aware that this is a unique person who has unique inner culture that may not be the same as me. So it's like, it's again in our relationship, the more we practice that to honor each other's uniqueness, the greater wholeness and unity that we're being invited to inhabit. That seems like the theme of our relationship. Yeah. So great. And so just now I realized, because today that Joe and I are going to do a conversation, and so I asked our technical side to put us in gallery view, and I realized I need to actually hide those panels that's the other panels that are not the Humanity Rising panel. I don't know if that's the case with audience, with viewers.
Spring, I've got you on gallery view, and the others don't appear.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah,
that's what I have too. And yeah, so if you set it to gallery view, that'll have us side by side, and you can drag one of us to the left or the right if you prefer that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have quite a bit of a story or a program. I think we're gonna just go into that. Well, let's usually we start a program with a music or a chant, but today I feel like, especially after what James have shared, I want to just share with you a simple embodiment attunement, because I noticed that when I was listening to Jim, the first part of his story, as I'm saying this, I invite you also to become aware of what you experience. I noticed this sinking sensation in my body, and there's inner tears forming, and then the latter part of his story, there's an elevation, there's a sense of dispersion, hope, that elevates. So I want to just share this simple, very simple Qigong movement that will, that helps you to move this energy whenever next time, if you hear, I mean, there we are so, with all the social media, everything, there's lots of stimulant from outside to get our nervous system worked up, and which is a good thing. Our nervous system needs to learn how to regulate itself, and this is just a simple exercise. So you can even do it in a chair setting. So I'm going to invite you to place your feet on the ground and just feel that the connection. And now let's raise our palm by our side as if we are raising the energy from the earth and to reach the sky. And with our awareness, our awareness flying out of our finger into the space above us to reach a source of light. And from there, let's bring that light with our fingertip into our body. And this is the downward, the descending energy, to move that grief, that sadness and anxiety through our torso and our legs, and move that into the earth. These are energies that are meant to return back to the earth, to be recycled, to be used, to be metabolized. And then you come back to the center and put your hands on the surface, on the top of your thighs, and have a few breaths. Great. Now let's do one more time. Our fingertips reaching down to feel the earth. And from there, we're raising. This is where our action can be empowered, allied by the earth's energy as we reach to, through our hope, to reach for potentials, infinite possibilities. And from there, we source a possibility, source empowered action, and feel the energy descend and wash away the grief, the anxiety, the sadness, and allow it to be absorbed by the earth beneath us. And then we put our hand back onto the top of our thigh. And then take a few breaths. Thank you. Thank you for joining me in this attunement. I just want to remind you, it's so important at this time for each one of us to maintain this energetic integration in our own embodied space as our awareness fly around the whole world. This is how the energy system can get metabolized and rebalanced. So today I would like to, the theme of my story today is for the, I in the first day one, I talked about my journey started in the pre-industrialized, multi-generational, very simple, rustic household. And I went through, and then soon that kind of culture become industrialized and modernized, etc. And I came to the United States and lived here for 30 years. And for the last 15 years, I have embarked on a journey. This is a personal experiment. I am also trained as a scientist. I want my hypothesis is it possible for me to harness this system that I inhabit that contains a very strong oppressive element of oppressive force? Can I use it as a catalyst to catalyze my own transformation, and in the process to weave a culture that will support me and the people I care about and interact with? So that's kind of the arc of the journey I would like to share with you. And I invite Joe to be my conversation partner. So Joe, back to you.
One little note I would like to make as we start here. You used the word journey a couple times in talking about this, this adventure you've been on, this process, this quest in a way. What's the translation of your last name?
Journey.
In some ways, it's like you were born to have this as a theme.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. See, that's the reason I invite my partner here, because he knows me so well. So for that reason, I want to speak my given name in Chinese. So in Chinese, we put surname, our family name at the front, and the given name at the back. I mean, there is already a cultural difference. We prioritize our connection with the lineage and followed by our individuality. So my given name in Chinese is Cheng Chun. Cheng means journey and Chun means spring. So
so this journey started a long time ago, actually, right? You want to take us back to that phase of things?
Yeah, so I think at the day one, in day one program, I talked about the three very important drive motivations for cultural systems. And I would say, I mentioned this motivation drive for belonging. And so at the time I was growing up in China, the Chinese culture was going through a very hard time. It was during Cultural Revolution. And I think upon the impact of the kind of perceived threat from the more technological advanced West, China was going through a transition of destroying or severing a lot of its connection with traditional lineage knowledge, like like Taoism, Taoist Buddhist temples were destroyed and sutras were burned. Chinese medicine was being adapted to fit within Western medicine system. So we basically were going through a cultural death, a cultural decimation. And I was born in that time. And even though I was very young, as a young girl, I have sensed something was terribly wrong. Of course, I did not have the ability to understand. There's no cognitive understand what's going on. But I remember when I was growing up, I felt this just palpable grief all around me. And in that environment, one thing that serendipitously has kind of I discovered that has connected me to the cultural lineage was ancient poetry. And of course, in that cultural decimation period, that nobody around me was into poetry or read poetry or even taught me about poetry, but somehow I was gravitated towards it, and I hang on to it like a lifeline. It literally feel like it fed my soul and spirit. That has maintained a sense of, it was in ancient poetry I felt a sense of belonging that I wasn't able to, a cultural belonging that was really important. I would say as important as food to me at that time. I actually remember as a young girl, I didn't have much resource access to a poetry book. So I actually saved up my lunch money in order to buy a poetry book.
Where would you find them to buy?
In like a recycled paper shop. Or, there's piles of old books and like supposed to be recycled and thrown into garbage can, and they will have like a sale, and I would go find. Actually, one of my favorite poetry book was like, I basically salvaged it from being recycled, and it was like really tattered and old and beaten up, and it was my treasure in my teenager years.
I'm curious, where did you keep such a treasure?
Oh, it was just my parents didn't, it was just littered around in the household.
Okay.
It's not like my parents did not forbid me to do this. It's just something that's ignored. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, as if it didn't exist.
So yeah, the poetry, this connection to this deep history and tradition and soul. And then on the other hand, um, maybe contrast that with the world of your parents' work, where you spent a fair amount of time.
Yeah, in contrast that was kind of like my inner domain. That was my my hide place in where it's like I created poetry becomes my hide house. But outside hide house, it was my parents were they are astronomers. They're it's an era where China was really caught into this firm grip of materialistic scientificism. So basically, materialistic based science becomes a doctrine that was imposed on everything. And as a um, my parents happens to be very bright and intellectually bright, smart people. So they were they worked for the Science Academy, astronomy observatory, and that's the environment I grew up. And that was what because that's the only world I knew and grew up, and that's that set the foundation of my first career which eventually launched me into to pursue advanced degree in molecular biology in the United States.
So I wonder if you could contrast these two worlds and your experience of being in them. So you used the word belonging to describe your relationship with poetry.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know, maybe just a little bit about what that felt like. How did you nurture that? And then in contrast, what did you experience in the observatory or at school where there was this drive to
Yeah,
excel and succeed in academic performance, etc.?
yeah. Yeah, so this is where I also invite audience viewers to here I'm sharing my story, but I want to pull out these threads of belonging and achievement as a way for you to also relate to your own experience. So for me, my relationship with poetry, it anchored a very primordial sense of belonging. It's something that I naturally love, even without understanding. Like it's not like as a young girl without an adult guiding me, I didn't even know what these poetry. A lot of times I didn't even understand what the poetry is about, but I just love reading them, love reciting them, love copying them. So the experience of that belonging it's almost like being nestled in a nest and being seen, and there's a sense of being nourished and nurtured. So I invite you as a viewer also to explore like what kind of people, it could be a people, it could be an environment, it could be a thing you like to do, that I think we all come with that innate sense of looking for something that gives that sense of that unconditional nourishment. So that's the first relationship. And then so my relationship with the outside world, which I call it the achievement centered world, it's actually a complex one. All these relationships, it evolves too. So I think at the beginning, because this kind of science technology advancement, this emphasis, this drive to achieve in science and technology development is being imposed from outside to me. I had actually a strong reaction against it, and that world feels scary because I'm always being measured, and there's like competition, there's win and lose, and if you don't win, then you don't get approval, you don't get seen, you don't get certain resource. So it's riddled at the beginning. It's very much riddled with fear and frustration, anxiety. That's how it's, yeah.
Yeah. And there's at the same time, it became dominant in your life. Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Someone asked in the chat about what led you to decide to leave China and come to the US. And I know when that happened and how early it was. And I'm just curious to bring that into the story. It's like, how did that decision get made, and what was the impact on that soul of poetry, that connection to belonging?
Mm-hmm. So here's actually an interesting, my cultural lineage is Taoism, and as from a Taoist perspective, everything has the two sides. It might have, to put it in a simplistic term, it has a side you like, and it has a side it may cause discomfort to you. So the traditional culture that I was born into in China, it provides a really solid kind of a sense of belonging. Like, for example, I talked about, I grew up in this multi-generational household. Everyone lived in very compact ways, and the neighbors can pop up anytime. The doors is always open. At the same time, in that traditional traditional way of society, there's a dampening of individual uniqueness. We actually have a saying that the birds who flies away from the flock is the one that's going to be shot by the hunter. So it's a way that you do not distinguish yourself. You do not, like, there's a sense of, this is part of our cultural DNA in the traditional way, that too much distinguish ourselves is dangerous. People are going to be envious, and you're going to be singled out, and it's upsetting to the existing kind of structure. So the reason that I was encouraged from very early on to leave China was because my parents are both very they are very as intellectuals who have independent thinking. They didn't fare well in that kind of social structure, and they have encouraged me to and also I think early on in my teenager years, there's also this romanticization of Western culture. I think this is another aspect of cultural sensitivity, is we all tend to, due to the pain and the trauma and the stress of our immediate environment, there's what's called romanticization. Yeah, romanticization of something far away, distant. So that's happened to me, to our family at a young age too. So my parents' frustration of being a very individualistic, have this individualistic streak in them, not able to fully express their uniqueness, they project their hope and desire onto me, their elder daughter. So they have set all the conditions and send me on this path. And I would say I am the same way. I have a very strong individuality in me. And that's kind of like my journey, is to explore how does this strong individuality and the belonging to this collective lineage, can they actually be in a relationship that is mutual to each other, rather than one setting up against another.
So how did things unfold from your earlier life then?
So one framework I would like to use is this. So basically, I think I was forced to. That my experience is that there's an outside demand expectation. It's beyond even expectation. It's a demand that you have to leave the nest of belonging behind. As a young girl, I wanted to give myself to the poetry, but it really it's impossible. All external pressure is saying that you gotta find a decent job and go study something useful. So I think that was it was a traumatic experience, because there's no guidance around me. I'm not saying that's a bad, it's actually, looking back, I appreciate that choice. It has its wisdom in it. But at that time, when I was a young person, there was no guidance. There was no way for me to process that transition, that experience. So it registered as a trauma. My experience is I denounced a part of myself in order to fit in this larger society, in order to survive, basically. That was the message I got. So I want to talk about my experience as a young adult in terms of a trauma experience, traumatic response to trauma of freeze, fight, fawning, freeze, fight, flight, and also fawning. Fawning is in this system of complex PTSD. Who's the person who has that theory? Joe, you probably know the name of that person.
I forget his name.
Okay. So many people probably heard this framework, fight, flight, fawning, and freeze. Yeah. So in a way, I kind of freeze, and I'm saying these, I think in the resonance, from the work I do in the resonance theory, the wholeness is actually, when I got to a place of wholeness, when I look back on my past experience, I'm there's acceptance. I'm not using these words. I don't use these words as a shame. I don't feel shame about any of this response. It's just what happened. And it's a strategy I navigate, a strategy through which I navigate a stressful, traumatic experience. And it's useful for that time. And eventually all these will lead to integration. So I would say that what happened to me is basically I froze the part of myself that is attached, is connected with the Chinese lineage through poetry. I froze it somewhere in my heart, in my body, and I found into the system, and I got my advanced degree. I like I said jokingly, the first day I was living into the Asian stereotype, become a high achiever, and got a decent job at the pharmaceutical industry. So that's my freeze and founding. And
Next,
yeah, go ahead.
which one of the fight or flight is next? Oh, wasn't there during the fawning there was a little bit of flight action too, right?
Yeah,
In-
so inside that, in the time when I was working at this high-tech biotech company, working as a scientist, where I didn't feel my heart was in it at all. I was just actually I was taking that job because of I need a green card to stay in the United States. That's the the primary driver for doing that. But I was feeling acutely how that way of life, way of being was against my true nature. And there's a kind of like escaping so that said, there's an intense inner conflict in me that was unbearable, and to the degree that it forced me to find an escape route. And my escape route at that time was I became a high adrenaline seeking mountain climber. I have taken on like very risky rock climbing and high altitude expedition activities. So that's my flight route, fleeing from the reality.
I wonder if it might be a good time to just pause and let people reflect on maybe their own polarity, inner this and that kind of tension between maybe fawning and flight or freeze and just how those live in this place of inhabiting different forces that are moving in from different directions on your being.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that invitation. And
So we've got the bit of the freeze element in the story from early on. We've got a bit of the fawning going on in your early professional life and the flight as a compensation or balancing for that. So we don't have any fight showing up yet.
yeah. So I think as a I practiced the Tai Chi all my life as a Eastern, and I'm a martial from very young. I had a training in martial arts as a if you have experience being exposed to Eastern Kung Fu master in movies, you probably will. There's a sense that as a warrior, as a fighter, I'm basically waiting for the ripe opportunity to fight. I'm not going to I'm going to conserve. I think the unconscious strategy that was also part of my cultural lineage is, for all those years, the impulse is just to quit my job and do whatever I wanna, was so strong. But I always heard this voice said, conserve your energy and wait for opportunities.
I wonder, is it relevant to bring in that that classic set of books, the story, the Kung Fu Masters or whatever it was called? I don't remember, with King or whatever. What was that, and is that
Yeah,
relevant?
it is.
Did that form this knowing that you had about how to guide yourself?
Yeah, actually, it is relevant. I want to say, I'm glancing at what's happening. There's lots happening in the chat, and I don't have bandwidth to digest. But I've glanced to something. Someone said where we are each bouquets. Sometimes we must sacrifice the poetic of our life to deal with reality. I think that polarity of the poetic self and this hard grid reality self, that's probably a very common, if not universal, polarity in ourselves. And actually, I would say that even for traditional wisdom, I find sometimes the kind of like the bookish kind of like authority way of learning traditional wisdom is hard. And fortunately, when I was young, because there was no mandate education of traditional wisdom anymore, we were kind of set free to explore whatever resource we have. And I end up with this, again, these are like books that are not supposed, so I actually remember these are books that the parents would not let me to read because they're not, sanctioned science books or whatever. But this set of book which are story based, fantasy based, kung fu fantasy classic series, and this writer was very gently and subtly weave a lot of the ancient Taoism and Buddhism ideas into stories. People, and then they weave this fantasy world. It's very much like a lot of the fantasy of the West, Lord of the Ring, that type of epic story. And that was actually, it ended up to be such a good education for me. I'm actually really grateful because actually in old days when there was a mandate, like education of Confucianism and Taoism, that way of education doesn't work with me too. It's too patriarchal. Whereas this embodied storytelling, it feels so much more nurturing, and there's no, that author didn't tell you, so do this, do that, you should be this way, that way, because that can also happen in the traditional culture, which also feels oppressive. But this is just a story, and I'm allowed to absorb and digest whatever that fits me at that time. So I really, that's kind of the kind of education I aspire to, actually.
Amazing example of the um, the paradoxical nature of everything. There's
Yes.
in this disruption of the entire cultural landscape. There were these opportunities for flowering that that showed up, and you grabbed one, and planted it deep in yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. That's also a deep teaching in Taoist culture, is in all death's land, there's always seeds being left for new life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's sort of pick back up on the fight narrative.
Yeah. I'm noticing that we're actually progressing. I mean, it's great. I enjoyed this, but we may not be able to finish the whole story journey. Maybe we'll have to find another part 2 of this, but let's just go at the pace of what it's present. So I feel like I was like warrior and just waiting for her opportunity, conserving my energy, conserving my resource, waiting for opportunities. So what happened is that in one of my flea expeditions, I was seeking higher and higher peaks. I was looking for higher and higher dose of adrenaline, which eventually took me to Tibet, where the highest peaks of the world are. And this is where I'm saying that all these strategies, when we are caught in it, it's traumatic. But when we are moving through it and integrate them, they are just the strategies of coping. And so this fleeing eventually lead to, it was in Tibet I had my first true spiritual awakening. And I attribute that very much to the land that the Tibetan people have preserved through their culture and heritage and spiritual belief in its pristine condition, where I felt vividly what's like to, to be connecting with the nature, like connecting to everything around me in the nature environment as if I'm part of it. So like in the place I visited in Tibet, the mountains were there was these sacred mountains have a couple and a minx who are actually a couple, a god and goddess mountain presence, and they were revered as deity, and people would do this circumnavigation around the mountain as a way to embody their reverence and respect for these mountains. And the image of the mountain god and goddess were in people's home and taverns and inns. It was just such a beautiful way of weaving the environment with the human existence. And it was
grab that photo of your wall.
grabbing. Okay. So I keep this picture of this mountain in my office to remind me of it just remind me I had such an extraordinary time. There's a valley in front of the mountain, and it's a village that can only be accessed by foot at that time. I don't know what's like now, through 2 days trekking, and people have been preserving that way of living for thousands of years. And I got about 15 years ago, I traveled there, and it was there I feel like I was empowered by mountain and the earth, and I was being given a mission, something in my body, even though I didn't understand what that was yet. And when I came back to United States, then the timing arrived. So should I go on, Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a let's say there was a lot going on at that time when I transitioned out of my job at a biotech. So I'm just give you a synopsis. After I came back from that mountain range in about 2 years, the job I was working for, the biotech company, basically dissolved. Well, actually, I decided to quit, and the company dissolved, and I went back to study acupuncture and Tao and become a student of Taoism, basically dip back into my cultural heritage. And one important aspect of that is that during my so that 2 years was the most tumultuous and chaotic time of my life, where everything I knew I had, including my marriage at that time, my ex-husband, whose name is Tao, and everything I knew disappeared, like basically fell apart in front of my eyes. And one thing I want to, many things happened in that, and if you are interested, you can follow my Substack, springcheng.com, where I telling much more detailed story of what happened. But I just want to say one thing is that in my traveling through Tibet, I've become aware of that how my own culture, the Chinese culture, has become also participated in this colonizing chain. And when I say that is that this kind of this consumerism, materialistic based worldview, it's like it's almost like a piece of DNA that's being spread around all over the world, and this drive for economic development has been pushed on Tibetan indigenous people by the Chinese people. And one thing that hurts me the most is that when I realized that in Tibetan schools that children are pressed to learn Chinese and not Tibetans, for obvious reasons, because there's not enough resource, and you got to, the reason, the rationale behind it is that you got to best prepare children to whatever skills they need to find a job, and it's learning Chinese will provide them with maximize their chance to find a job. So it's the same thing that happened to me when I was a child, when I was a young girl, that I was this imposition on me to leave behind the source, the food of my spirit, and learn a different set of language, including English and modern Chinese, which is very much westernized, or absorbed this Western logic. And so this really hit hard in me. And this is the signal that I realized now I have to stand in my warriorhood, because it's through standing by. So basically, my position of the Chinese now has these two sides. Now I used to think I was only surrendering and falling into this, external modern system, but now we ourselves participate in this, and this is the time when I said to myself, I cannot let this happen. This chain has to stop at me.
What did that look like?
What that looked like? Well, you say ask a little.
Well, what I'm wondering, does it make sense to connect it with the seeds of change kind of thing, or the seeds of compassion, whatever it was, and the Tibetan Chinese conflict here in Washington, and getting involved in that, and yeah, there's a way that you were standing up for something that seems important to the story.
I'm actually thinking about here how we're gonna steer the rest of
what is our time
10
limit?
minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I don't think we can. I have a sense that we probably won't cover the whole story as we were planning to today. Yeah, it end up the story is much longer than than we thought.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there, and every single facet of it. I don't think it matters that much that you covered the linear chronology, but I think what we're what we're doing is every facet gives you a window into this, the art of this cultural dance, right? And inhabiting it and perceiving it from the outside as well, is part of what you're putting together and bringing forth, is the ability to do that, the skill and the art of doing that.
Yeah. So maybe I'll follow that line and share this integrating the warriorhood is a long, I've been learning that continuously for 15 years. Maybe I'll just give some like shots, some image. So first of all, let's see so in 2008, I was living in Seattle, and there was a conflict. There was actually violence that happened in China between Chinese government and Tibetan people. And that conflict has translated into intense conflict in the immigrant community all over the United States, actually. In many cities at that time. That's 2008. That's 16 years ago. There, like in college campus, the people would there are people from demonstration from all sides were clashing with each other. And so because I'm a Chinese, I was born as a Chinese, and because I have allowed myself to felt deeply as both as the victim and a member of the perpetrator class in this dynamic. From the very beginning, I couldn't, there's no way for me to set Chinese up as like the bad guy, and also there's no way for me to watch Tibetan people to suffer. So I think this is where, so as a result, I have conducted, you have to realize at that time, I had no experience whatsoever I was just a science nerd working for a biotech company, but the circumstance is such that this is where I think I experienced magic. Like I had no resource, no skill, no anything. And just with that intention, holding this unity, because the way that Tibetan and China, it's the unity is living in me. Just by the virtue of my life, and so by holding that intention of unity, it just like a magic, out of from nowhere, support and resource came, and I become the leader of a movement called Seattle Listens in China. Sorry, in Seattle, in Seattle, which lasted for 8 months, where we formed a compassionate listening group, where we go to listen to the stories of Tibetans, and we go to listen to the stories of Chinese. So in that instance, let me explain a little bit. In that incident, because the media has a one-sided portrait of this event and portrayed Chinese as the villain, as just a black and white portrait, that further ignited that triggered because Chinese people on the large, they already felt there's already felt like there's oppression and threat from the Western world. So anyway, so there's very complex politics. If you are interested, again, I welcome you to go to my Substack channel, springcheng.com. But in that event, basically, we formed a team of compassionate listening, where we find a group of people on both sides, and listening to both and ask them to tell their story, to express their emotion, to form human connections. And then in the end of that project, we bring actually two sides together to that it was the first time most of them to actually see their enemy as a real person. And this is my first social project conducted as a newbie, as someone who've never done anything like that.
So there's a way that you're bringing together these two realms inside yourself, that the part that went back to the deep love of the poetry and the traditions, and that's the part that sort of came more alive and woke up and found its kind of home into
Right.
that.
Right.
And then this other belonging to your Chinese culture and everything in the world that contributes to that, and being,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
So I feel strongly that, you know, at that time, you know, even though I myself held uttermost respect to Tibetans, and I didn't commit any, I myself did not physically commit any violence to them, or nor any of my family has that. But I felt so vividly I'm responsible for that. And I'm not feeling that out of a shame of guilt, but there's just this knowing that this is my people who've done this violence to another group of people, and I got to be part of. I got to. I think that's the first time I awakened to my leadership inside of me, a compassionate leadership. Yeah.
So does it make sense to kind of turn that towards I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the course as a whole and what you're planning, or is there some more pieces of the journey that
Yeah. So
seems
I think today our our storytelling, I think, and like reached probably halfway of the journey I was planning to share, which is great. Maybe I'll just land it at the sharing. So after that 8 months project, Seattle Listens, I got a I feel like I felt like I received actually a gift from the Tibetans that I worked with, because as a Chinese person who was growing up in an era when I was severed from my traditional, you know, I grew up wearing Western clothes. I wasn't taught any of my traditional customs. I was secretly reading poetry, and that's about it, my connection with ancient culture. But you know, because of that project, I was in Tibetan temple and visiting their home, and what, you know, they really, you know, the Tibetans really welcomed me, embraced me as part of them. And I felt like I was a child and watching what's like for a group of people who are connected to their ancient custom, ancient culture. And that was the gift that I received from that project. And out of that felt sense, I realized in order for me to develop my leadership, in order for me to be more effective, I have to connect with my own culture much more than what I have had done at that point. And that was what pivoted me to leave my, it was difficult to leave my very high paid, secure, prestigious job. But that was what has pivoted me. And then I went back to study Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and Taoism. And that's the second part of journey, which we don't have time to talk about today.
but that sort of ends up in, you know, in resonance code and
Yes, it eventually end up. So you know, synopsis. I thought I was gonna be an acupuncturist, but I realized that role did not fully express my whole potential as a leader. So I I'm more drawn to the metaphysics aspect. What's the metaphysics and the way of perceiving things behind the way of knowing, the way of perceiving the world that has given rise to acupuncture and Chinese medicine. And when I become aware of that, I met you, and we formed our partnership, which generated Resonance Path Institute, and which lead us to me today here and talking to you about cultural sensitivity. So, thank you, Joe. And anything? I think the last piece is I want to talk a little bit about this course. Do you have?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Can you put the flyer into the chat?
Okay, sure.
So just the 5 minutes, or maybe 3 minutes, I want to share that this 3-day concluded our summit of cultural sensitivity, and this is a prelude and invitation for you to check out the course that Stephanie Mines and I put together. And there are 2 parts of the course. One is a free offering on April 19th. It's also a part of the Climate Change and Consciousness Earth Day action week. So Joe is putting up 2 flyers in the chat box, and that one is free to everyone. And then starting from May, we're gonna hold a 10-week immersion of cultural sensitivity. So many of the things you experienced already on this summit, the storytelling, the embodiment, embodied attunement, the exploration of belonging, the exploration of polarity, the exploration of the soft poetic way of knowing versus the hard analytical way of knowing. How do we integrate them? How do we find these different aspects of ourselves and explore the process of integration as a community? So if you want to know more, please join us at the free class, April 19th. And also there are more information online. Let me pop the links to the chat box as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Great dialogue between the 2 of you.
Awesome to be here. Thanks, Jim. I'll step out now.
I'm sorry?
I said, does it make sense for me to step out now?
No, we're going to wrap it up momentarily, so we can go right into the after chat. But thank you both. I was just saying, I was very struck by your narrative of your experience as a Chinese person in Tibet, because there's been such an extraordinary agony that the Tibetans have had to suffer. In many ways, not unlike what the Palestinians are suffering at the hands of the Israelis. There's been a cultural genocide, I would say, in Tibet that has been going on for as long as what the Palestinians have suffered. So the Tibetans and the Palestinians have deep fraternity in terms of how they've had to survive ongoing attempts at genocide. There's no other way to call what the Chinese have attempted to do there. So I just wanted to bring that element in, that what we're focusing in on Gaza is not unique. It's more horrific because it's on live TV, as I said, but no more egregious in terms of violation of human rights and the sanctity of not only each individual, but a tradition as rich as Tibet and Palestine should not be vanquished from this earth. So just appreciate that you as a Chinese person learned so much in Tibet. and have brought it to this discussion.
I also want to comment on, just like Palestine and Israel, who actually shared a unified origin, they are all people from
Yeah.
that, and same thing as China and Tibet. They are very connected, and their history are intertwined. Their emperors, the princess, they intermarried together. So that's kind of my path, is to hold that, to embody that unity in the face of this clash and violence.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Spring. And I hope Joe as well will join everyone into the after chat. So we'll bring the program to a close for now. You'll see the link to the after chat in the chat box, and you received it in your Zoom reminder. And then starting Monday, everyone, we're going to have a 2-week program, with the exception of the equinox, where we're going to talk about the Kogi prophecy and our pilgrimage to Teotihuacan. But we're going to on extraterrestrials, everything from how to contact them to abductions to the nature of the ETs. It's going to be a very exciting, very diversified program on humanity rising as humanity enters into its ET moment. So thank you, everyone. Have a good weekend. I'll be back on Monday with the GoFundMe for how we can help the Palestinians.
Thank you.
Thank you, Spring.
Thank you, Jim.
Bye, everyone.